Okay, yes. Aha. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's section. We are now at the week 6 of the CSN AWS Cloud Bootcamp, and it's a privilege to have everyone here on board. I must tell you that, um, in a way, I'm actually also really excited because the thing with learning is that it's very easy to start. And as I said in the beginning, it's very easy to start. But then it would depend on your dedication, how much you're willing to push through to the very end. That would then, um, that's what is going to tell on how, on what you're going to get out of this program. So trust me, we're in the age where technology is moving fast, where things are advancing, even with um, both in the cloud space and the cyberspace, even with technologies like AI, which I'll talk about shortly also in a few seconds. So it's very important that we are up to par, right? It's very important that we're up to par, especially in our respective countries. But most importantly, I do have um, a person of honor with us in our midst. I have a very powerful person, instructor for today. No other person than Ekene Ejike. I'm going to introduce him shortly, but I can assure you, you are going to learn a lot. If you would notice, we did cover um, ECS, Elastic Container Service. I don't know if you were in the last section. You can just comment or say something. So yes, we did cover ECS in the last week, and we had a very um, beautiful instructor also that took us through that section. But then we know that ECS is vast and containerization also is very important. In fact, there are other containerization services in AWS like EKS, Kubernetes services, but we'll not delve into that. But we needed to use one more week to delve a bit deeper into containerized services. How do you launch containerized services in the cloud? What's more exciting than deploying one of the most well-known and well-used um, website building tools on the internet, which is definitely WordPress. And WordPress has been there right from day one. I don't know if any of you have been into IT, but any of you that have been into IT a couple years back would know deploying WordPress before it would be you going to some cPanel, doing some configurations here and there, manipulating PHP sometimes, and it can really get messy. But now we're in a containerized world, so we need to stick to that. Um, I will not take us. I will not take our time too much. Let me go to what we have in store. Based on our curriculum, we are completing the first. This week is going to mark the completion of the first phase. I would say the part one of the bootcamp. So congratulations to everyone that has made it thus far. Right? I've seen people that are still maybe trying to catch up. So that's the reason why we make sure that tax submission is done not on a weekly basis, because there are people that may not have will not meet up, right? They want to have do this at their own pace. So at the end, at week 10, as we've said, the form will be opened, you'll be able to submit your tax. But then, congratulations to all of you that are already here, that are in sync. The future is really bright for you. Um, it's very important that to the next phase of the program, which is a lot, which is where you would even get a lot more value, connecting into mentorship and connecting into our ecosystem. With the few people that we are able to work with, we'll be glad to work with those few and ensure that you can help you build your career. Okay, so we are in the week 6. This is really good. Week 7, week 8, we'll just be touching on some other key components around maybe storage, S3 buckets, CloudFront, really exciting sections too as well. So just make sure that you stay tuned. AWS is a lot; it can be a lot, but just stay connected. At you'd keep on go over the sections repeatedly, and then you'd definitely be on track. And then now to our lovely instructor. So I'll not lie to you. This is um, Ekene is a guru. I'll just be frank with you. Ekene is a guru. I met him a couple of years back, and you definitely know from me interacting with him that no, this is someone that's he's not just doing the talking, but he has done the work. Like he has gone all in. He's helped organizations both in financial services, also in outside of Africa, different countries, help them to secure their cloud environment. So yes, Ekenejike is a cloud security engineer with experience securing cloud environments in the financial sector. He specializes in designing secure cloud architectures, implementing identity and access controls, and monitoring infrastructure for vulnerabilities and suspicious activities. So, with hands-on expertise in both AWS and Azure, Ekene supports organizations in adopting cloud-native technologies while maintaining strong security posture. He's also a technical writer. He creates guides around Docker, Kubernetes, Postgres. If I'm mentioning terms that you might not be familiar with, apologies, but that's who we have here. But then my instructor is going to break things down for us a lot more. In our last section, we did ECS, but we did not connect it to any database. But if you would know, if you are in the tech industry, you know that applications need to have some database. So that's why we're taking things gradually. So it's important that your application talks to a central data source, which is what our instructor is going to take us through. Before I hand over to our instructor, I just want to briefly remind us about the CSN pulse that is going to be happening very soon. It's simply just a Twitter space where we just come and just share ideas. I think roughly an hour. We are seeing how fast AI is growing, and I'll tell you, with the way AI is growing, I will not say everyone should be worried, but everyone should be watchful. Yeah, that would be it, right? Because now you can see AI can now write emails, it can build websites. You see new tools that you just tell it what you want, and then you have a website in a matter of seconds and minutes. It can help you even pass exams, and now we are seeing a lot of advancements with um, um, human like voices, right, with AI. So the question is, if AI is getting smarter, is it also getting safer? Are we really moving too fast? This is a conversation we need to start having. It's not just a conversation that needs to happen in other places, but also really needs to happen here. If your job is at stake, you definitely need to know how to stay advanced, but that's just on the side. So I have a lovely anchor on that day that will just take us through that. So that's it. Really, that's it. I always like to keep this brief so that we can get into the meat um, for the day. So at this point, I'll just hand over to our instructor. Our instructor is going to take us through RDS and also going to take us through ECS and how we can use these two technologies to deploy a full-fledged WordPress application. Thank you very much. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Okun. I don't know, reading that short biography, I sometimes ask myself if that truly is me. But thank you. It's an honor. Thank you for having me. And also, thank you to everyone that has joined so far. I also want to say hi, quick shout out to Raj Mohammed. I see is also in the comment section. Thank you for leading us up until this point, basically. All right, so without further ado, we'll just go ahead and begin the session. So for today, we're going to be talking about and also practicing how to deploy WordPress, a WordPress blog in the cloud using AWS ECS and AWS RDS. So the last class we learned about how to use AWS ECS. And other classes leading up to it, we've learned about networking as a VPC, IAM, and other things. So everything we've learned up until now is very useful because we're going to need all of these skills in order to successfully WordPress in deploy WordPress in ECS and also connect it with a database. All right. What are we going to be building today? It's basically a WordPress site or a blog. We all know that WordPress is used for a blog, and like Okon rightfully said, before now you need like a cPanel, a configuration panel, where you have to do lots of configurations, the plugins, all of these things, and before you're able to get your WordPress up and running. I know there are people that offer, there are companies that offer these services, basically a cPanel deploying a website for you, servers and things like that. But right now, or in this day and age, you have everything in one space in the cloud, which is AWS. We can easily spin up a WordPress instance in a matter of minutes, and we go ahead and design our blog or whatever WordPress for. Okay, so for today, it's basically going to be our PC website, a WordPress blog, then store the data in database. So WordPress needs sort of like a database, a structured database to store its posts, comments, and things like that. So we'll be using, or we'll delve deeper into using ECS to deploy this, and also connecting ECS with RDS as well. But don't worry, all these terms are going to be, I'm going to break down all these terms and all that we need to do so you would definitely appreciate, these service offerings. Okay, so I also mentioned the difference. I also talked about the traditional hosting and cloud hosting. So here are just some points or the differences between traditional hosting and cloud hosting. In traditional hosting, you have things like having to buy or rent a server. Then you install WordPress on it manually. Then you now have to manage everything yourself, including networking, including, well, maybe not the underlying networking, but networking of the system, including updates, patches, and all of these things. And trust me, that can be very, very tedious. Aside installing WordPress, you still need to install a database on the server, or you could get another server for your database. It all depends. And it all depends on your service provider. If they offer a database service, all well and good. You also need to worry about backups. In this day and age, backup is like very key because you never can tell what could happen to your data. Aside the fact that you could have hackers prying at your system or your website. It could it could easily get corrupted. I mean, the database and also the site data as well. But you also have to, that's in the traditional hosting, you have to take care of. You have to be intentional about backup, basically. You also have to handle security updates, like I said, patching, making sure that all the components, like for WordPress, WordPress can be very, very tedious to patch because the way WordPress is designed, you have things like plugins, I think Elementor and a couple of all these things. You always have to update those plugins because hackers can easily way into your blogging site or your WordPress environment if any of these plugins you've used are vulnerable. It's very easy to do, quite easy. A script kiddie can even do it. So these are some of the issues about traditional hosting. Even using AWS EC2 can be considered traditional in a way, though. Aside the only difference is you are not actually buying data; you're paying for that ECS service. Sorry, EC2 service, not ECS. So using an EC2 can, in a way, be considered traditional because now you have to install WordPress, install a database, and all of these things on that particular EC2 server. But now with the cloud or with something called ECS, with something called ECS, you don't have to worry about patching. You don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure because we'll be connecting it with something called Fargate, which you learned in the sorry, we'll be running it on something called Fargate, which you learned in the previous class. Fargate is a serverless offering, and you don't have to worry about backup. You don't have to worry about the underlying server. AWS will handle the patching, the backup, ensuring that it is up to date. Always available. So the only thing you have to worry about is the amount of money you will pay. And when it comes to the amount of money you pay, you also have control over that, depending on which service offerings you pick, depending on what you have selected for AWS to do for you. Like for example, RDS, if you picked the data replication, backup, and all of these things, you also have to pay for that as well because it's not free. Okay, so moving on to the next. Sorry, please drop in questions if you I think I saw one about yeah, for the slides. Yeah, definitely, I'm going to share it, and I'll share with Mr. Okon, and you get it after the class. I think, but I'm definitely going to share it. Okay, so the next slide speaks about our architecture. So this is what we're going to be deploying in AWS. It's quite simple. This just shows it's always good to have like an architecture because it gives you a mental picture of where everything is at. So that if you want to troubleshoot, you know if you want to troubleshoot, you know where to go, you know what to, you definitely know where to go. Basically, if something is not working right, you know where it is placed in. For example, this architecture shows us a subnet where our services are placed in. You can see the ECS is placed in a public subnet. We're going to be using the default VPC to deploy this, so it's not going to, so just to avoid so much complications, basically. So it's placed in the public subnet so that you will be, because we're using a Docker image, and for you to get a Docker image, you need to connect over the internet to get a Docker image. That's why we're placing this ECS in a public subnet. The database will be in a public subnet, but we're not going to make it public so that you can choose to make it public, but it's always advised not to put your databases in a public subnet or make it public at least. But it's still going to be in a subnet so that it can easily speak to the ECS service. And also, the ECS can talk to the load balancer, which then the load balancer will now receive traffic from that's users, people out there on the internet. So it's going to be it's a very very simple architecture and shouldn't give us lots of problems. Okay, so we already know about ECS, following on from the last class. Okay, zooming. Sorry. Okon, can you help with zooming in, please? I think it's a bit. Okay. All right. All right. So let me just proceed. Okay. So for I was mentioning that we already learned about ECS in the previous class. So I'll just be spending more time on AWS as a service offering. Still saying, I think the moderator will handle that, the zooming of the screen. Some people are saying it's still blurry. No, it's a bit blurry or blurred. Share what the WordPress and what's the WordPress and what is for. Okay, so I think it's important to answer this question. Someone is asking, what is okay? Those complain, sorry, not complain. For those that are talking about the screen and the blurriness, please try to use your Zoom feature. Okay. All right. So someone is asking what a WordPress, and what is it used for? So WordPress is a web application for hosting web content. Basically, you could think of it about if you have read blogs on the internet, blogs about life, lifestyle, blogs about food, technology, and all of these things. Most of us, yeah, some of these, not most, some of these websites are actually built or powered by WordPress. So WordPress is it's a web engine that you can use for anything. You could use it for it's very popular in the blogging industry. It's very much used by bloggers because of the ease of operation. You can easily you know you can easily manage a WordPress site for blogging, because the reason why is not too many bloggers are tech savvy, so just to avoid rigorous, all of this coding for that comes with HTML, CSS, and Java, they can easily use a WordPress site. WordPress is just like drag and drop. You want this to show here. You can easily write out your blog, whatever information it is you want to pass. You can add plugins that would help you display things nicer. So there are it's just easier to use than having to build a full-fledged website. So if you're thinking of WordPress, just think of it as the easiest way to think of it is as a blogging website, basically. Yeah. So someone also dropped it. It's an application for building blogs, websites, and all of these things. Okay. Yeah. So we'll move on to AWS RDS. I was saying that we already learned about ECS and the new addition or the new offering or the new AWS service offering that we're adding is AWS RDS. And what is RDS? It's a relational database service, basically. And relational database is, if you've heard about the likes of Postgres, MySQL, and all of these things, they are all database services. So AWS has grouped all of these things under a service offering called RDS, AWS RDS. So you can easily just go there and select anyone you want, depending on your use case for it. For example, our use case now for this is deploying a WordPress website or a WordPress blog. So we would need something an SQL database, most preferably MySQL. MySQL is very suitable for it interacts easily with WordPress, so you can easily store data like your can easily store data like comments, posts, and all of these things on the WordPress site. So you can store all of these things in data in an AWS RDS database. So aside from the database itself, why what makes this so special? Because you can easily just go get a server, install a database there, connect it to your WordPress website, and just go ahead and use it. But what makes this special is because AWS handles a whole lot of things. The infrastructure, it handles the infrastructure, it handles provisioning, it handles patching, it handles a whole lot of things. Like you don't have to worry about anything. Just use the database, basically. Just connect it to, in this case, a WordPress blog or website and just use it. Don't worry about power, don't worry about patching, don't worry about updates, don't worry about any of these things. Your data is always safe, provided that you pick the option of data replication, backups and all of these things. We're going to see that when we get to the console. It's just click, 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 and you're done. You basically set up a database in less than 5 minutes or thereabouts. So you can also think of this AWS RDS as hiring a database administrator. You are hiring a professional database RDS administrator to help you handle all of these things. Yeah. Okay. So I've seen two interesting questions here. I was about to answer this. What happens when a database reaches max capacity? So this is almost impossible. The reason I say so is, regardless of your needs, AWS will provide it for you. So that's why I said it's almost impossible. Well, it is possible, but the chances are very slim because whatever it is you want to use it for, AWS will provide it for you. Whatever space you need, AWS will provide it for you. Throughput, bandwidth, storage, AWS will provide all of that. Just tell them what you need by clicking on the options that they have provided for you, and they would offer that service to you. Someone's also asking what's the meaning of RDS. So RDS is relational database service, and relational databases. When you talk about databases, there are two types: structured and unstructured. So the structured one is the relational databases. That's your SQL, and you have things like there are providers or yeah, there are providers like MySQL, Postgres SQL. There is also MariaDB, Oracle, SQL. There are different SQL servers. So these are the structured databases, and there are the unstructured ones. We're not going to look into the unstructured ones, but because we're only dealing with the structured database, which is this relational database service. So on the screen there, you would see examples of SQL databases or relational database services. So what AWS has done is they have taken all of these database services, brought it into their platform, and they would help you orchestrate it basically. They will help you manage the hardware, they will help you manage networking, they will help you manage throughput, they will help you manage everything basically. That's what that's the special thing about AWS RDS. It's still the same databases, but the special thing is that AWS manages a whole lot of things for you. You just worry about connecting and using it. Okay, so the next slide speaks to the database engines, and this is particularly about this the WordPress I'm about to deploy today. So as you can see, it says pick your fighter. So for this today's demo, we're going to be using MySQL. And if you look closely on the screen, the first image shows WordPress, and the ones that it is very that it works with very well, quite suitably. We have four different types: MySQL, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and AWS Aurora SQL. So you might ask yourself, what's the difference between AWS Aurora SQL and the other MySQLs or Postgres? So the difference is that the MySQL, normal MySQL, and AWS Aurora MySQL, you will see that when we get to the console, when we're about setting up the database. So the difference between both is that for AWS Aurora MySQL, they're actually the same, should I say, the same tool, but the difference is this is a special type of MySQL from AWS. So it offers more throughput. And when I say throughput, throughput is all about when a database is speaking to an application, how fast can they exchange data? That's what throughput means. So it offers a higher throughput, bandwidth, and all of these things. That's just a special offering. But it doesn't mean that when you use the ordinary MySQL, it wouldn't work as well. It works. It's just that AWS have a specialized package for MySQL. I think they support to Postgres SQL, Aurora Postgres SQL, and Aurora MySQL. But when we get to the console, we're going to see all of these things. And the other slide, I know it might be a little bit small. It just speaks about, what AWS offers you if you choose to use AWS RDS for your WordPress site. Gives you about 99% SLE, speaking to uptime basically. Gives you more security, gives you backup, gives you isolation. So these are things that they will handle for you basically. All you have to do, like I said, is just use it. And that's what we're going to be doing in today's demo. We're just going to connect it to our WordPress application so you can use that database. So it gives you a whole lot: notifications, performance insights to see how well you're doing, whether you're maxing out. Someone asked about what if we use up. Sorry, I can't remember. Okay, what if we max out the capacity? So you have a monitoring dashboard as well that gives you able to monitor and see what's going on. And if you are maxing out, you can always scale that database, provided that you have. I'm not sure if they offer this after you have created a database. I think it's while creating it, you need to tick that option for auto scaling. But after you've created it, if you have not ticked that option, you won't be able to scale that database. So you're always covered basically when you are using any of these services. Okay. All right. So here again are just some of the RDS benefits, and we already spoke to this. And this is what you want versus what AWS does for you. So if you say I don't want to lose data, AWS RDS does it for you because it can handle daily backups, provided that you selected that option. If you say you want it to be always available, we saw in the previous slide where it speaks to 99% of time. They're able to always provide a copy, keep a safe copy of your database backup, for you at every point in time, so that if anything happens, you could always, you know, come back to operation or resume operations using that safe copy. There's also fast performance because of the kind of storage they use. I think everybody must have heard about SSDs and HDDs in our laptops. So you know that PCs with SSDs will perform much faster than PCs with HDDs. Coming from 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you know that you know that things like the HDDs are slower. Even SSDs, they have defaults. You know, AWS gives you a more faster and optimal one that you can use for whatever kind of application you want to connect to that database. So there are some applications that will need a higher throughput, that will need better speed, all of these things, more bandwidth. So AWS handles that for you. Okay. Then for secure data, you can choose to encrypt everything or not. So it's always advised to encrypt your database because in security, there's something called encryption at rest and encryption in transit. So encryption in transit is like when you're interacting with a website. That HTTPS is speaking to encryption in transit. But data at rest is things that you've stored in a database, in a file, or somewhere, and you have to encrypt that data so that even if someone gains access to it, they can make sense of that data because it's already encrypted. So it's always good to encrypt your database. Yes, it's RDS is quite amazing because you don't have to. And one reason is I was working with a friend sometime in recent times. We wanted to build like an application, and we needed the database for it. We opted to use PostgreSQL. We had to go and start installing it on an EC2 instance, and we thought, oh, there is AWS RDS. Why do we even have to do this? And installing it, we had to start patching, doing all the APT upgrade and all of this. So it was just so tedious. Why not just use RDS? Yeah, you can use RDS free trial, but then again, don't leave it running for too long, please. Because of the cost involved. Because you have to pay for the underlying infrastructure. It might be little, but you have to pay eventually. And lastly, on the slide, it says no maintenance, and you can easily because AWS updates it updates your database, like it patches it up if there is a new update. It will update it without you knowing. It's quite easy, very, very easy. And, here is just an estimate of the cost that you will spend if you're building a small blog, using AWS RDS service. You're spending roughly about approximately $15 to $20 if you are using, this is just for AWS alone, doesn't cover ECS, but it's just for AWS alone. And this can further be brought down if you untick some services, like all these automatic backups, automatic data replication, and all of these things. They cost more money. So if you churn down the options, you definitely get a lower price. But you do it at your own peril. So this is just how we're going to set this up. We've seen this earlier before, but I'm just going to skip this because it's a bit small and you may not be able to see it. So one is just a secure setup, and one is a less secure setup, basically. Okay, there's a question. Sounds like this lecture. Okay, I think maybe the moderator would. Yeah. All right. So next slide speaks to what we will do today, and basically we're going to be creating an AWS RDS database, specifically MySQL. Think of your database as your file cabinet where you're storing all these files. Those files are information about people, about things, and it could be anything, but keeping these information in that cabinet. And next is to create an ECS cluster. This we have already done, and also a task definition. So this is just preparing you can call it a small workspace where we're going to that we're going to use to orchestrate our application or run our application, basically. Someone is asking, please, what's the difference between ECS and EC2? Okay, so ECS is Elastic Container Service, and EC2 is Elastic Compute Service. I can't remember why that two is there, but the major difference is that ECS is for containers, while EC2 is a virtual machine. So when you are using ECS, so ECS provides two options for you. Yeah, sorry, Elastic Compute Cloud. That's EC2. Sorry about that. So the difference between both is when you're using ECS, you can use EC2 with ECS or Fargate with ECS. So remember, ECS is it's a cloud service that allows you to run containers easily and more efficiently than using an EC2 instance. You can decide to spin up an EC2 instance, install Docker on it, or install Kubernetes. But it means that you would have to everything about running that Docker or Kubernetes instance on that EC2. You have to take care of the server. You have to work on updates. All of these things, even deploying a new image and all of these things, you have to basically, you're the administrator, basically. But if you're using ECS, AWS is more like the administrator. You are just using the service to run whatever containerized application it is, like in our case, WordPress. So EC2 is virtual machines. ECS is a service for specifically for containers. Okay, I hope that helps. Someone is asking what risk can one encounter using RDS. So the risk is minimal, you know, depending on how you configure RDS. So if you're configuring, that's why I mentioned that it's always advised not to put your RDS in a public subnet. The reason is because it will mean that anyone on the internet can access your database, and databases are used to store sensitive information. So it's the risk is mostly around your cloud engineer and how he or she has configured that service. But the risk of data loss is minimal, because you have data replication, you have automatic backups, you have all of these things. So you cannot just lose your data. So long as you're taking regular backups, you would always have something to revert to. But the risk is minimal in terms of data loss, though. Okay, so these are just some of the important terms. Also, here is a cost breakdown of using this service, or basically what we are going to do today. And from here, so these are pretty straightforward because we have used most of these things. It's just RDS, that's the new addition here. So from here on, we'll just go straight to our browser. We'll just go straight to the demo, and we'll take it from there. So while I'm sharing my screen, I'm just going to answer one or two of these questions. All right. Once my screen is up, please let me know if you can see it. Okay. Can ECS container talk to a database outside the AWS ecosystem? A database server running on local? Yes, it can. It can. But the thing is, you have to make that database public so that ECS can speak to it. Yes, so AWS can, ECS can. Yes, and what kind of applications can be deployed using RDS besides WordPress? So there are so many that you can deploy using. There are so many you can deploy. There are so many applications you can deploy using RDS. For example, it's you can deploy business intelligence applications. You can deploy. Just trying to think of even normal, maybe something like a vulnerability dashboard application. There are so many applications you can deploy. Basically, any application that requires you to store data in a database, you can use that. You can use RDS to store the data basically. But WordPress is just a very basic one that you can quickly use RDS to you can set up easily and use RDS to store its data. Okay. And if my screen is visible now. Yes, that's a very interesting question. How do I update WordPress if a new version comes out? Do I need to reload and push the image again? Yeah, so you can create another task that will do that for you. Okay, so moving on to our demo. So we're going to start with creating a database. And like I mentioned, we're going to use AWS RDS. And it's quite easy to create the database. All you have to do first off is search for RDS once you're logged into your AWS console. It gives you this option. You can just click on this Aurora and RDS. Remember, I mentioned Aurora is just a special offering from AWS. Yes, Jote, sorry if I mispronounced your name, but yes, you can deploy and connect to RDS like a core banking application does. Yeah, any web application or any application, mobile web that requires you to store data in a database, you can use RDS for it. Okay, so once you are here, you just click on Create Database, and it gives us the options or prompts to create a database. So remember, I mentioned Aurora MySQL. So the first option here is choose a database creation method. We can either do standard create or easy create. But let's just do standard create so we have the power to pick what we want. If you do easy create, it's going to use a template for you based on best practice, like you can see. Use recommended best practice configurations, basically. So we're going to go with the standard create. Then the engine options. We are Here are the databases that AWS supports, AWS RDS supports. And you see here we have Aurora MySQL, Aurora PostgreSQL. So what it means is this MySQL and this one, they're both the same, but this is just a special type of Aurora or MySQL from or PostgreSQL from AWS, basically. So we can easily go with this or this one. I'll just go with MySQL. And right here it tells us about the edition. We're using the community edition because that's the free one. All of these, you can just leave all of these things as default. Then the engine version, you can leave this as default. And when it gets to the templates, we don't need production. So for, I can't remember your name that asked about, maxing out. You can see all of these options: increase read capacity, redundancy across availability zones, and things like that. So, but we don't need the production. We need free tier because we want to. It's just for test basically. So you can see it's just one instance. But for these other ones, you have two instances. The main and the backup. So we're going to use free tier and the single easy. That's availability zone. So here is just the name. You can call it CSN WordPress database, basically, or whatever name you choose to give it. Now to the credential settings. We'll go with this default one, admin. Admin is fine. Then for credential management, so AWS gives you something called secret manager. We're not going to use this because it's also another very secure way of managing your database credentials. We're going to use a self-managed one. Self-managed. And if this is enough. Okay, so we'll be using this for credentials management. So we're using self-managed. Then we're going to pick a password. Just pick a very short password you can remember. 123 using secure hash 123. So it's quite easy. You would see the password once it's done creating. But for here, I don't have the option to show the password. I think I'm currently at 200. This is 250 right now. So I'm not sure. Just to confirm, how's my screen looking right now? Okay. All right, so we have chosen our credentials, username, admin, password. I've selected a password. Shows weak, but that's fine. And next is the instance configuration. That's what hardware should our database run on, or the features of the hardware that our database should run on. So since we're using the free tier, I think this is fine. We're just going to use two vCPUs, 1 gig RAM. Then the networking is this. This is fine for us. And storage, remember I spoke about SSD. So these are all the offerings. We'll use the default one, which is this. We don't need, yeah. So this is additional storage configuration. So because this is just a test, or this is for demo, we can untick this auto scaling. So this also helps with maxing out of resources. It helps you auto scale your instances, database instances, basically. Then for connectivity, it's asking if we want to connect to an EC2 instance. No, we don't need to, because we're using ECS today. We're going to just connect to, we're not going to use the option of connecting to an EC2 instance. So do not connect. The network type is IPv4. Then, yeah, very important. I know for some of us who would have multiple VPCs. For this, let's just set it to the default one. The default one works well. So let's just set it to the default one because I'm not sure of the configurations we must have done in our VPCs, but let's just use the default one on to be on the safer side. So we will be sure that it will work well. Then the subnet, we're using the default subnet. It has three subnets, three availability zones. So we're going to use that as well. So if you have other VPCs, just switch to the default one. And for public access, no. So this is where I said you can, once you, if you turn this to yes, it means your database will have a public IP address and anyone anywhere can connect to your database. So for this, we don't need it because it's only our ECS cluster that's speaking to our database. So we don't need to give it a public IP address. The next is our security group, basically our firewall. This tells us who can connect to our database from where and things like that. That's what security group is all about. So for this, we'll be using the default one. I know some of us will have multiple, so just use the default one. So the default one is fine. Availability zone, no preference. We don't really need that. We don't need the property. We don't need, okay, this is fine. This is optional, but it's fine. Database certificates. So it's going to use that by default. Database port is fine. We don't need tags. Next is database authentication. We're going to leave this as default. We're using password authentication. So we're logging into our database using username and password. Then monitoring is fine. We don't need all of this. We don't need this. So another very important thing is under additional configuration. Under additional configuration, we want to add a database name. So we can call it WordPress. So this is speaking to the Postgres or MySQL is just a shell. Inside the database, you need a name for the database that will contain your tables, columns, and all of these things. That's what this is. So we're calling that database WordPress. And all other options are fine. For backup, we can just untick backup, untick encryption. We don't need all of these things. You can leave maintenance. Maintenance is fine. But for best practice, please don't take all of these things. It's just because we're using this is just for demo for testing. Do not untick all of this backup. So these are the offerings I told you AWS will manage for you, basically. All right. So every other thing is fine. I think every other thing is fine. So we don't need to pick any other thing again. So once we're done, we can just click on create database. And while it's creating, I'm just going to duplicate this tab. I'm going to duplicate this tab. Remember the steps are create a database, create a cluster, task definition, then create the service, basically. So we are creating a database here. So the next thing we want to do is create a cluster. So to create a cluster, we're talking about ECS now. so we have done the RDS part of things. We're going to do the ECS part of things. So we'll just search for ECS, this one. All right, so while this is creating, let me just look through this. Okay, screen is fine. All right, thank you. Okay, so Victor, if you want to get to database, all you need to do once you're logged into your console, just search in this search bar here. Just search for RDS. Whatever service it is you're looking for, just use the search bar. You don't have to know where it is. You don't have to use this and look for the service. Just click on this search bar, search for RDS, and select RDS. If it's for now, we're done with RDS. So next is ECS. All I have to do is just search for ECS, and it shows up here. I'll click on the ECS service. It takes me to the screen, the console screen for ECS, basically. So in ECS, what I want to do now is create a cluster. And to create a cluster, I just have to select the option here, clusters, and click on create cluster. So this is quite straightforward. Give it a name. I'll call it CSN dash, let me say WP as WordPress cluster. Then under the infrastructure, we're using Fargate as a serverless option. We're not using EC2, sorry. We're not going to use EC2, we're using ECS. And that's all we need to do really. Just give it a name and ensure this option is enabled or is ticked, and you click on create. It's as simple as that. Clusters doesn't take time. It shouldn't take time to create. So once we're done creating clusters, so I'm going to be opening a lot of tabs. So the reason why I'm doing this is so that I know what to delete when I'm done. So once I'm done, I'll just go into each tabs and just delete all of them. That's why I'm using separate tabs for each. So I'm done creating a cluster. I think this is fine now. It says no task is running. So the next thing I want to do is create a task definition. So remember, task definitions are just instructions on how to run a specific service or application within ECS. So click on create task definition. Okay, so for the name, I'm just going to call this CSN dash WP dash CD for task definition. CSN WordPress task definition. Then for the requirements, infrastructure requirements, AWS Fargate is fine. We're going to use the default CPU and default memory, which is 1 vCPU and 3 gigs of memory. Okay, so hello, Emmanuel. If you're typing in that password, one thing I've noticed is there are some characters that if you include, it's not going to accept it. Things like @ / quotes, all of this is not going to accept it. So just use a very simple password. Don't use @ or any. If you want to use any special character, use hash or the £sign. Okay. And next is about the task rules. All we need is just the task execution rule, which is already selected. I think we should all have this. The other ones are not necessary. Yeah, another very important one is the container. So for the container, we're going to use WordPress. And all we have to do is just type WordPress. WordPress is the name of the container. And the image, we're just going to type WordPress. So we're using WordPress, the image URI, because we're getting it from Docker and not from ECR. There's ECR and there is Docker. ECR is image repository is an image repository service on AWS. So yeah, you need to, I don't know if you followed. Okay, just a minute. I'll get back to the database creation once we're done here. Name, URI, then the port mappings. Aside from this name and the URI WordPress, I'm not touching anything else. Container is port 80, protocol is TCP. These are all fine. Read only is not necessary for now. All of these things are fine. So now brings us to environment variables. So this is where we're going to instruct our ECS to connect to our RDS database. And we'll be providing the variables for that would aid ECS in connecting. So all we have to do is click on add, and I will go to WordPress Docker Hub so you can see. So this is the official image that we're going to be pulling into our cluster, and it's from the WordPress Docker Hub website or page, basically. And if you scroll down to this section, how to use the image, they have given us certain what's it called, environment variable names. So it should be like this because this is what the container, when it's spinning up, this is how it's going to read the values. So it's looking at this. I think it's case sensitive as well. So that's why we're coming here to grab all of these names. So the first one is DB host. We'll go back to our ECS task definition. Under environment variables, the key will be database WordPress underscore DB host. Then the value is this. So we're going to get the value from, once we've entered the key, we're going to get the value from our database. So my database is successfully created now. And I'm going to click on view connections. So viewing the connections, I can see the username, I can see the password and the endpoint. So now the first option here is WordPress DB host. And the host is this endpoint. All I need to do is just copy this, come back to this tab and paste it in here. So I want to add another one because if we go back to this WordPress site, there are a number of variables here. The next one is WordPress DB user. This is a bit small. So the next one is WordPress. Next one is WordPress DB user. First one is WordPress DB host. I'll copy this user, come back to this task definition to add another one. Then the value, I'll get the value from here. This is the value. The user is admin. That's the username. Come back here and paste the value here. I'm going to add another one. Next one is WordPress DB underscore password. This is a password to the database. I will go back to the task definition, paste it in here. Then I will go to my database connection details. This is the password. For the image name, must we use WordPress? Or you can use WordPress, please. As I typed it in WordPress, small letters, because it's pulling directly from Docker. It's pulling directly from Docker Hub. So if you mistype the name, it will just tell you not found, or it would not create your application. So just use it exactly as I defined it here. Under here, container details, name WordPress, URI WordPress, exactly like this. Okay, so I've done the host, the username, then the password. I'll just paste in the password so you can see my password. It's quite simple. Just use something like this to avoid complications and for you to easily remember it. And I'll need to add one last one. And the last one is just the database name. So remember I said the database name is the name of the database inside the instance, the database instance. There is database instance and there is now the content of the database. So the database name is going to be, so to get the database name, remember we defined it as WordPress. But if you do not remember, we come back to our RDS screen, scroll down to databases, click on it, then scroll down again to this section. You want to select configuration here. Under configuration, we would see instance ID and the DB name. So this is the database name. Copy this and come back here and just add the value. So that's all we need to do really for under the environment direction. So we're providing this so that when this image is starting off, it's going to use all of these values: the host, the username, password, and the name. So please ensure these things are all the same. Ensure they are all the same. You can, okay, yeah, that's all. So when I say all the same, I mean the keys, WordPress, ensure it is how defined here on the website. WordPress underscore DB host underscore user underscore password. And after that, we move on to log collection. This is fine. All of these things are fine. Restart policy. Yeah. So all of these things are fine as defaults. The default options are fine. And once we're done, we click on create. Yeah, once we're done, we click on create and the task definition is created. Remember, task definition is just they're just instructions basically of how our service should be run. So once we are done with that, next thing we want to do is now we have created a cluster, we've created task definition. The next thing we want to do is create a service. We want to, where is my task definition? Why am I not seeing it here? Just to be sure. Sorry guys, let me reduce this to be sure. Okay, yeah, it's there. I think it's just my screen resolution. Okay, so it's actually there. So next thing we want to do is we've created database cluster task definition. We want to create a service now. So the service is now what is going to run our actual WordPress website. So to create a service, you go to cluster, go to the cluster which you have created, and then scroll down to services. Scroll down to services and click on create. So under creating service now, remember we already created an instruction, and the instruction is the task definition. So we're going to select that task definition we've created. To use the latest one, you can choose to rename this service or you could leave the default. That's also fine. Okay. Next is the environment. It's already using the cluster and what has been defined in the cluster. This is also very important. Ensure once you get to this environment, ensure you have selected launch type. Ensure you have selected launch type. And launch type will show that we're going to use Fargate basically. That's a serverless option rather than EC2. So we're using Fargate, the latest. The deployment service type is replica. Desired tasks is just one task that we need to run. For high availability, you want to run more than one. But basically, we're just going to use one because it's just a demo instance that we're running. There are other deployment options, but these are not important. The next very important thing is networking. So remember when we're creating our database, we put it in the default VPC. You also need to add this ECS, this service, ECS service in the default VPC so that it will be able to speak to that database. So if you've used a different subnet VPC earlier, your service needs to be in that same VPC where your database instance is. So ensure this is set to the default. Then the subnets are fine. We use all of these subnets that's showing up here. But if you have other VPCs, ensure you are only using, once you have selected VPC, default VPC, the subnets related to that VPC will come up here and just tick them or select them from this drop down menu. So next is security group. So we can just use the existing security group basically. Remember, security group is firewall who has access to our ECS cluster. Basically, that's what ECS's security groups are all about. So we can use the existing one, and we would want to keep the IP turned on, public IP. So the reason why is this service is going to, remember we're using an image from Docker, and this service needs to go and pull that image from Docker. That's why we need this public IP address turned on. If it's not turned on, it's going to fail when it tries to pull that image. Right? So Yeah, this is fine. Ensure it is turned on. Next thing we need is a load balancer because we're dealing with an application here and, you know, it's a blogging site and you want people to access it externally. So a load balancer would handle all the incoming traffic from the outside world, basically, whoever wants to access your website. So it's going to handle this and share, the traffic accordingly to your tasks that are running, your backend sets, basically. Or in this case, is the tasks that are running. Okay, so the load balancer type is application load balancer, not network, because we're dealing with a web application and it operates at layer 7, which is HTTPS. Then container is WordPress on port 8080. Application load balancer, we're going to create one because we don't have an existing one. So we'll just create a new one and call it, say, CSN WordPress dash LB load balancer. We'll also be creating a new listener because it will listen on port 80. The application, containerized application, is already running on port 80. So we're exposing port 80 for the application. So your load balancer is also listening on port 80 so you can connect to that application. And our target group is we're going to create a new one basically. So we just call it CSN dash WordPress dash TG. Yeah, that's correct. WordPress dash TG. And the protocol is this HTTP. So all of the other options are fine as default. They're fine as default. But one thing I would like for us to check is I'll duplicate this. It's at the networking level, this place that speaks to this security group. I want us to check that security group to be sure that it allows traffic to go out. So in a new tab, I'm just going to search for VPC because security groups are under VPCs. If you don't know what service it's under, just search for security groups and you see pick this second option because it's under VPC. If you pick once we go to the security group, we should have sorry, I need to reduce this into so I can see. So this is a security group here. I'm just going to open this and zoom in again. And in the security group, I want to check the outbound rules. So the outbound can go anywhere. So that's fine. While the inbound rule is, okay, the sources. So let's just edit this inbound rule. We'll edit the inbound rule so that it can accept. So inbound means coming in. And our under here, the load balancer we're creating is going to be in this subnet. It's going to be in that subnet because this is the VPC. Sorry, it's going to be in that security group because of this. This is VPC it's using. Okay, so we will just we'll add a rule and say, we can say allow HTTP, allow HTTP from anywhere. Add another one and say allow HTTP. It's not necessary though, but let's just add it. HTTPS from anywhere. Application is running on port 80, so this will do the trick. HTTP from anywhere. Then save. So let me just show a summary of this. Let me bring this back in the tool. So we have added two more rules, HTTP and HTTPS. So port 80 allow from anywhere. The initial one is only allowing traffic from itself, the security group itself. So it's just services that within that security group are able to talk to themselves. But instances or services that want to talk to the outside world, or sorry, that need communication from the outside world, will not be able to. It will not go through basically, or it will not reach its destination. Okay, so once we're done, We'll come back here and we're done with all these settings in services. And we'll hit on create and give it some time to create. So this is going to take a little while for it to create. While it's doing that, let me see if there are any questions. Okay, sorry about that, Hemba. Where are you lost? So I could just recap. Someone is asking how can someone handle WordPress plugin and theme updates in a container-based setup. So you have access to that admin panel. You're going to say once you're done deploying it, you see you have access to the admin panel, so you can basically do whatever you want. Handle your themes, your plugins, your blog itself, your write-up, all of these things. Oh yes, Natasha, I would show you how to do it. It's quite easy. That's why I keep all these tabs open so I can track what services I have created. It would also be good to open another tab for because we created load balancers. Just open another tab, search for load balance. So balance load balancer. This second one because an EC2 feature. Search for this. So just gives you like it tells you it's just to keep track of what it is you have created, basically. I need to reduce this so I can see. So this is the load balance I have created. That's fine. Sorry about the noise, Collins. I saw someone ask a question about setting up the database. Your request to create. Yes, you say your request to create a database instance didn't work. VPC must have a minimum of one subnet in order to create a. Okay, so it means that your VPC during the creation of. Let me just go back to this place and click on. I'll go back. Click on create database. I'll do the standard create. I'll just scroll down to the networking aspect. Aha, so under connectivity, the VPC, if you're using, that's why I said some of us we may have like multiple VPCs already created. If you have multiple VPCs created, just use the default one. This is one that comes with the AWS account when you have signed up on AWS, basically. So just use the default one that comes with it. Because I know the ones you have created, it might have some certain configurations that maybe you use it for a specific for a use case. And using it here, if you're not aware of what you've done in that VPC, you may just some things may not connect or interact with each other, basically. So once you have selected the default VPC comes with subnets as well. This is the subnet here, the subnet group. So I think yours has only one. That's why it's complaining that you should have a minimum. Okay, it doesn't have anything at all. That's why it's saying a minimum of one subnet. So the VPC you must have selected does not have any subnet, which would not work. So you just use the default VPC. It already has everything configured as it should. Yes, Ukira, the image URL is WordPress. Yes, can you connect a domain to WordPress? Yes, you can, but you need to use another service called Route 53. Yes, you can connect a domain to your WordPress website. And does creating an EC2 instance create a default VPC automatically? Yeah, so when you're creating an EC2 instance, under the, should I say, instruction sheet, there is an option for creating a VPC. So you can create a new one, or decide to use an existing one, basically. So, yes, it depends on what option you have picked. Okay, VPC, apart from the one I created myself. Yeah, okay, I already answered that. Sorry about that, 2KZ. Okay, for the image, for the image name, must we use WordPress or you can use any other name? No, you must use WordPress because we're deploying WordPress. And in the WordPress Docker Hub, this is how it has been defined. This is WordPress. So this is what you must use. The image name is called WordPress. And ensure it is, I'm not sure if it's case sensitive or insensitive, but ensure it's all lowercase. Okay, why didn't we use HTTPS in the port configuration? Because by default, this container image already exposes port 8. So if we're going to use HTTPS, it's not going to work. It's already exposing port 80. That's the container image itself. We need to um, we need to use port as well, not HTTPS. HTTPS will make it port 443. At one point, you connect a domain to your. Okay, I think I already answered that. So you need to use a service called Route 53. Is a DNS service basically. So you need to register your domain there. That's if you have a domain elsewhere, you can bring it to Route 53 and connect Route 53 to I think it's the load balancer. Yeah, you connect Route 53 to the load balancer. So your load balancer will be listening for connections there. So anybody that hits that domain, it will now redirect it to where it needs to redirect it to. Off the top of my head, yeah, that's how it works or it should work. Yes, definitely. Is it possible to restrict access to the WordPress container so only specific IPs or VPC resources can reach it? Yes. So, would for you to do that, our CSN service needs to be in a separate in a it needs to be in a separate what do you call it now, a separate VPC. So if you want to do all of that isolation, it needs to be in a separate subnet. Sorry, not VPC. It needs to be in a private subnet, basically, for you to do that isolation. Yeah, if you want to deploy other applications using ECS, if you want to use ECS, application must be containerized. What if you want to deploy other applications rather than WordPress, maybe a personal application? That application must be containerized if you're going to use ECS. Still the same step. At that point where you are entering the container name, WordPress, and image URI. Image URI is WordPress. The container name is WordPress. So you need to enter the name of your application and the image URI. That's just the difference. And you have to take care of the ports you have exposed in the container and things like that. Okay. So just to ask a quick question, how many of us are familiar with WordPress, as a designer or web developer? Okay, so our service is up and running. Let me know in the chat if you're WordPress as a designer or a web developer. All right, so our service has been created now. I'll go to under services here, refresh, click on services here, and I can see that one task is running. Basically, okay, not here. So once I'm in the service, I want to go to configuration and networking so I can find this DNS name for my load balancer because we're accessing this via the load balancer. So it's services, the name of the service, configuration, and networking. Then you scroll down and look for DNS names, which is this. And if we open it, let's see if we have access to Okay, it doesn't support this. Continue to the site. Aha, so we have our WordPress running now. Okay, I see Josephine is saying I'm familiar with WordPress. That's nice. So this should be easy for you. And you can tell me the method of the WordPress websites you've worked with, the deployment model, comparing it with this one. Which one do you prefer? I'm familiar with WordPress. I bought the domain and created my website, so that's nice. As a developer, what about SSL certificate? So SSL certificate, there's also another service called I think it's ACM, Certificate Manager, Amazon Certificate Manager. So you will need that as well if you want to connect HTTPS with it. Okay, so yeah. So don't worry about all of the HTTPS and all of that. In subsequent classes, it will be covered. So don't worry, CSN would cover all of these things for you. So what happens if the ECS container restarts? Will my WordPress settings be lost without persistent volumes? So if it restarts, it's probably because there's an issue. And typically, your what's it called, persistent volume is already going to be created, because let me go to the logs and show you something. I hope it logged it though. Under services logs. Let me see if I can open this in another page. It's a bit small. So basically, for okay, so for persistence, we want to use I think it's called AWS FIM. Let me search for that. File manager. EFS. EFS, exactly. So we want to use this to connect it to for persistent storage. We want to use a file system for it. If we're going to use persistent volumes. Yeah, and also since we already have a database connected, everything is already in the database, and the database is standalone. We're only using this to store our WordPress documents and everything. So all you have to do is just spin up another task, or even if it restarts, it's not a problem. It's not a problem even if it restarts. So we already have our database connected. It's going to use the same database connection strings, go into the database that we named WordPress, and look for all of the details, and takes us back to where it is we stopped. All right. So here is our WordPress admin panel. All we have to do is just continue and pick a site name, and just call it CSN WP. Pick a username. I'll use WordPress user. Let me just use the same password I used for my database. Yes, and next week, confirm the user with password. That's fine. And hit. So it's pretty straightforward from here. Just click on install. Sorry, that's not valid. Oh, okay. I enter my email. Oh, sorry. So this is asking for email. So email is I'm just going to use something email or email. I don't, because I'm going to delete this afterwards. It doesn't matter. I'll click on install WordPress. So I have that already, and clicking on login should be able to log in using my username WP user. My password is secure hash 123. I remember me logging. So can't remember who asked about plugins, managing plugins and all of that. So you can easily manage all your plugins from here. Where is plugins? Yeah, plugins. So you can manage all your plugins from here. So this is like the admin dashboard. So yeah, I want to sorry, just checking. Um, so Chinedi, if you want to get a cheap domain name, you can use things like okay, so I'll just take questions if you have questions at this point. But I see one on the screen. Chinedi, where can I get a cheap, affordable domain name? So you can use you can go to smartweb.com. You can get a .ng domain name for as low as 5,000 naira, I think. So you can go there, smartweb or Google Hosts. If you're in Nigeria, though, it's better than using the foreign ones like Namecheap and the other guys because you'll be paying in dollars basically. So you can just use Google Host, this one. I want to set up a domain for my deploy WordPress. What steps do I need after the ECS deployment? So you also need to create Route 53. You would also need an SSL certificate, basically. So Route 53 will be connected to your load balancer. So these are just the extra steps you need to take if you want to successfully deploy that. The available lesson notes or modules. I don't know about lesson notes, but the slide will be available though. And also there should be notes on the LMS portal too. So we're done with database setup. That was the first thing we did. This is the database here. Database setup was the first thing we did. So this is the database we set up, and this is our connection details. So we set up this database. After setting it up, we went to ECS and we created a task definition. And that task definition is where we entered in these connection details, basically username, password, the host, and also the database name. So yeah, we're done setting up the database. RDS, yes, relational database, yes, that's this the screen. Okay, all right, guys. So the comment section is still open for more questions. We're done with our setup basically. The most tricky part about this is getting the VPC connections right. Just refresh the page. My services are still showing deployment in progress. Is this normal? Just refresh the page to see if it's done. It could be, if it's not working, it could be from your VPC. Maybe it's unable to pull the Docker image or there's something wrong somewhere. Okay, all right. So since we're rounding up, let me just show how to delete the all our services. Okay, so we can start from the database. Basically, we'll just come here. This is the database. Click to open. Under actions, we click on actions, then delete here. So it will ask you if you want to create a snapshot because deleting a database is quite sensitive. So, but we don't need to create a final snapshot because saving that snapshot will cost money. And we would acknowledge these are just preventions to make sure that you actually know what you're doing. So I'll delete the database. Okay, so this is deleting. So while it's deleting, the next thing I want to do is come here under clusters, go into the cluster, click on the service, delete the service. Click on delete, then ensure this is ticked, force delete. Otherwise, it would fail. It would throw an error if you did not take this. So it has to scale down that application that's running before it deletes it. So just do this, force delete. The service is deleted. We can go ahead to the task definition, come here and you click on it, select this task definition, go to actions, deregister. Once you have to deregister it first of all before you can delete it. So once you deregister that task definition, you can now delete the main task definition, this one. So there's a task and there's a task definition. So the one we deregistered was the task, while this is the task definition. So I think this should, let me see if we can, okay, there's nothing here again. I think this will go off eventually. Okay, so this is fine. There is nothing there anymore. So once we're done deleting the task definition, next we want to do is go to the clusters and click on this cluster, then delete the cluster. So I ask you to enter this, just enter this one and delete the cluster. So while this is also deleting, we would want to delete our load balancer. That's why I had this screen open. But if you do not have it open, you can just, from any screen, just search for load balancer. Search for load balancer. You want to pick this option that says EC2 feature because load balancer is part of EC2, the EC2 service offering. So you click on this. I already have it open here. That's why it's not going, but that's how you search for it. Then load balancers, you can come here, click on this load balancer we've created, go to actions, delete load balancer. So you should type in confirm, then just delete. So if you have not deleted that service before coming to delete load balancer, it will throw an error because the service was is using the load balancer. And once you're done with the load balancer, you can see it's empty here. You go to target groups just to make sure you refresh this. Okay, still there. Click on this, go to actions, delete. Delete that. So you have to delete the load balancer before you delete the target group because load balancers makes you make use of target groups. So you delete the load balancer first and the target group. So now the target group is gone. And our database is still deleting. I can refresh this and see if it is gone. Okay, still deleting. That's fine. It will go off in a minute. My cluster has been deleted. If I click on cluster again, you can see 0. If I click on task definition, it's now 0 because I deleted that cluster. This is clean. I don't need this. If I come back to my WordPress website now and refresh, it's going to go off because I've already deleted my load balancer. Even if my load balancer is active, it's still not through an error not found or something because the application has been deleted. So I think this is all. That's all. Yeah, so you can leave your VPC and security group. Those ones are fine. They don't cost money. All right, guys. So that's it. The database has been deleted. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, could we reuse this exact ECS setup to host other CMS? Yes. So, but the only thing is yeah, Drupal. I think Drupal has a containerized a Docker image, so you can reuse this. Can we view what's inside our database? Yes, you can. But remember when we were creating the database, I did not select public IP. So without that public IP, you cannot connect to the database externally. Connecting from my system is the same as someone else from anywhere connecting to that database. So without that, you can't connect. Okay, so I'll just hand over to our moderator. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. I hope this has been productive for you guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Ekende. Wow, this has been a lot. So this really, I would say, changes the game in terms of deploying applications. With this, you're powerful because you can do a whole lot. There are several applications. In fact, you would see one in our weekly tasks. There are several applications that you can use to want to that needs some database connectivity. So with the setup our instructor has taken us through, it's very easy to definitely go ahead and repeat the same process. It might be some different database, and then you will easily just take it up from there. So I'm going to take us through the tasks that we have for this week, and we're going to see our instructor will maybe. If you would allow us just for like 30 seconds, maybe a minute, you just walk them through what they need to do differently in the weekly tasks. Okay, let me put that up on screen. So yes, the task is simple. You have to set up Metabase. If you don't know what Metabase is, go and do your research. Metabase is a business intelligence tool, right? You have to set up Metabase, um, and then using on Amazon ECS using the Fargate launch type, and then you will then connect this to a Postgres SQL database. Postgres SQL database, no longer MySQL. All right. So there's an official Docker image for Metabase. And just as our instructor did, you would also need to configure this with the necessary environment variables for to ensure database connectivity, and also make sure they are in the same security groups to allow both inbound and inbound traffic from port 5432 and also inbound traffic from the internet too as well. So you just configure all that. Ekene, do you want to take us briefly through maybe what they need to do differently here? Same stuff, maybe just a different application.
Oh yeah. So just a quick one. It's still the same process basically. I would speak mostly around the ECS service and task. So at that point in time, that's where okay, your database first of all, rather than creating MySQL, just create Postgres. All of the steps are the same. Don't allow public access, like don't give it a public IP. Use that same default VPC security group, so that you can master these deployments before you now start creating your own VPC, isolating your database, and all of these things. Just use the default VPC like we have shown, but use create this time create a Postgres SQL database. And choose to use the Aurora one or the normal one, still the same. So once you're done creating a database, next thing is your ECS. So ECS now has, remember, service task definition. So first things first, you want to create a task definition, which is instructions on how to run your service. Your service is Metabase in this instance. So you create your task definition. You include your your image. You include your its Fargate. Obviously, that's the serverless functions. What else? What else? Then the environment variables. So the environment variables are the ones from RDS. Your host, your username, your when you're deploying Metabase, ensure that you use the documentation. You know how I showed the WordPress official image, so that you can see the instructions on how it accepts variables for the container as a Metabase container. So if it needs a username, get the username of the Postgres username. So I was doing one after the other. Get the username, the host, the password, and the database name. Put it there, save your task definition. And the next thing you want to do is now create a service. You must have created a cluster where you create a task definition, then service is the final thing. So service is where you include your image, your Metabase image. So it will still be something similar to the WordPress. The name is WordPress, the URI is WordPress. So it will be something similar, but confirmed from the Metabase official Docker Hub page. You can just search for it like that on Google. So you enter the name and also the image URI. The ports, you also have to confirm the port on Metabase. I think it should be port 80 as usual, or port 8080. Then the next thing you want to do is what else? What else? What else? Your load balancer. Load balancer is optional, but it's advised to use a load balancer. Then also your networking. Your networking, ensure you're using the default VPC for that service so that you can speak to your Postgres database. These things are very important when it comes to communication. Networking is very important. Use that same default VPC just to simplify things. The more you do, then you can now advance your security posture of your infrastructure, basically. So ensure you put that service in the same subnet or in the same VPC that your Postgres is. Automatically, when you're creating the load balancer via that instructions as the list of instructions, you would see your load balancer would also pick that default VPC you have picked for the service. And yeah, that's all really. Also, your security group, ensure that you allow inbound traffic from anywhere so that when you are trying to reach your application via the load balancer DNS name, you are able to reach it. Because these are some of the challenges you might face. Why is it not working? Just one little thing that you need to toggle and it will work. So yeah, it's just follow the steps. Replace WordPress with Metabase. Replace Postgres with replace MySQL with Postgres, basically. And lastly, just a special shout out and thank you to Raj. He has been very helpful because he answered a whole lot of questions in the chat as well. Thank you very much, Raj. What can the image URI be? Metabase. So just search Metabase official Docker Hub page on Google to take you directly to their page. So you'd see the name there. All right. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. I know you would have several questions, but it's all good. It's totally good. Simply just go to um, any of the WhatsApp group or Discord, anywhere. Just type in your question. Someone there will be ready to assist you. I will just tell you for now that this is just another step in your learning journey, but definitely don't stop here. Leverage also as much resources online as you can leverage AI too as well. It's AI is not meant to be your enemy. It's actually meant to be your friend. The cloud is constantly evolving, so you should also constantly evolve. Stay curious, stay persistent, and keep going. Thank you so much, Ekene, for having us today. Thank you for the insightful class, as Lerato just said. So have a beautiful day, everybody. See you next time.